We go to resurrection accounts. Let us establish some common data that all four evangelists agree upon in terms of burial. And the witnesses to it. So all four speak about Joseph of Arimathea. They mention that he was a disciple of Jesus. We never heard of him before, but he was kind of a disciple who Luke said that he was a good and righteous man who had not consented to the purpose and deed of the council, right? And he also was looking for the kingdom of God. So he comes to Pilate. Pilate released the body to him. Mark, which is brief gospel, very brief, give even more detail. It's interesting in this account. So first of all, he takes courage to go to. He took courage to go to Pilate. Why the courage is? Because first of all, he goes against the decision of the Sanhedrin first. Second, because he's a Jew. And for him to touch or even to do something, who was kind of died on the cross by an impure death, was prohibited, particularly in this big day of preparation to the Passover. Some tradition, obviously apocryphal, because it was not in the gospel or in the act, says that he was even arrested later by Sanhedrin members and was in a prison, but Jesus released him somehow mystically. But but we don't know anything about it. But there was a danger for him. So, what Mark said, Pilate wondered if he were already dead, and summoning the centurion, he asked him whether he was already dead. And when he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the body to Joseph. So that is a detail. So, but they all say, agrees that he came on his own to Pilate and had a permission to do that. That's first thing. And so he takes the body down. John adds Nicodemus. Also, we learned about Nicodemus only in his gospel. So, because he describes his visit at night on the third chapter, and then he said that's exactly the Nicodemus who came here at night. So the two of them take them down. Let's make a note that all four evangelists are unanimous and that there was no disciples whatsoever, not a single one, of the 12. And actually no males at all. But Joseph and Nicodemus, who are members of the council, Jewish council. Now, who was present? Who was a witness now? And so he laid it in the new tomb, which had been hewn in the rock. So they all say these things. Luke gives just one detail, because, where it was a day of preparation and the Sabbath was beginning. So there was so he hastily put it into his own tomb. John says when two of them came, Joseph and then joined by Nicodemus. They took the body of Jesus and bound it in a linen cloth with the spices, as is a burial custom of the Jews. Now, in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden. Little explanation. And in the garden, new tomb where no one had ever been laid. Because of the Jewish day of preparation, as the tomb was close at hand, they laid Jesus there. He doesn't mention whom the tomb belongs, but we know from Matthew and Mark that it would belong personally to Joseph. So, and actually, the description is pretty accurate. Everything is very close. The day coming to an end. It's a great Sabbath. So, you need to do it very hastily. So, and if we attend, if we go and visit the Holy Sepulchre Cathedral in Jerusalem, we can be amazed that this so-called the cave of the burial on the one hand and Golgotha were about 30 meters apart in the same building, and you can walk in between them. So they build it around this site. So now, who were witnesses? So in Matthew, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the sepulchre. Mark, that's his 15th chapter. Mary Magdalene and the Mary, the mother of Jose, saw where he was laid. Luke just said that the women who had come with him from Galilee followed and saw the tomb and how his body was laid.
I ask a question?
Sure.
Me, Larissa.
Yes, Laura. Sure.
Um, I'm embarrassed to ask it because I'm afraid there is no answer.
If there's no answer, at least I don't know.
Why would it be that the Joseph, the distinguished man, probably of some means, would have a tomb made so close to a place of execution? I mean, how did it happen that they were so close?
First of all, he might had that like kind of a family something, and it probably was there before. And who knows? Maybe they just choose this place ad hoc for just we don't know what was the reason for Romans to the place this place. Well, it was not too far from the city, it is said, and it was pretty deserted garden. So who knows how it got.
Was the place of the skull? So there must be some, or is it a later nomination? The place of the skull.
It's called the place of the skull. But it's Larissa, it's interesting point. We have to probably look in the depths of the tradition of this place, because it never came to my mind to investigate more. Probably there is more in it.
Maybe because it was a place for burial, so it's called the place of the skull, not a place for crucifixion.
Yeah, well, exactly. Is it there was a kind of little type of a cemetery, right?
Yeah,
I see.
maybe.
Maybe it might be a good point, because then they just threw the bodies into the common grave. So you have to dig it up, not to carry it far away. it's difficult. It's difficult to it's difficult for me to even to think about it because I have no idea how these things went together. Because obviously, the cemetery is a holy thing. The cemetery is a holy thing for the Jews, as it's obviously for Christians. It has to be sanctified and so on and so forth. For Jews, it was the special burial. So just it's good question, actually. It's good question, but and it probably have some elucidation in the tradition, the patristic something, but you have to probably investigate it.
Let's investigate.
Let's investigate. Okay. Now, uh, John, it seems to me, doesn't mention any witnesses, but synoptics do. And so one particular person is there as a Mary Magdalene. She is mentioned by name. So by name. Other Mary just in Matthew, and explanation that this Mary is the mother of Joseph. So that's what it is. So the picture is, the place is established. They knew where the body was laid. Disciples didn't even appear. So for them, it was not even known. Maybe they asked where he was buried, but probably, the sense that all evangelists give about their attitude was that they were so depressed, the 12 particularly, so depressed. Obviously, Judas already hanged himself by that time, that they didn't even care. Their expectations were thrown completely. Where, it seems to me that they don't look at him as the deceiver, but something completely incomprehensible. So to say, it was predicted, but in which way? And what does it mean? Where all his powers gone? That was their question, probably in their mind. And as we read the story of the resurrection, it seems that that is a picture of their state of souls, state of mind. All right. Now we go to Matthew, because against this background, now the resurrection story develops. We read it, and let's read it again, Mary. I ask you, Matthew 27, 62, 66. Next day.
Next day, that is after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember how that impostor said, while he was still alive, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people he has risen from the dead. And the last fraud will be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go make it as secure as you can." So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard.
Okay, we read that, and we had discussion raised by Peter why this medieval Renaissance pictures, pictures the soldiers. But first of all, we have to ask. Let's ask ourselves and them. First of all, what their source? If you picture something, you have a picture before you. Where did you get it? First of all, the only place you can get it, it's from this description of Matthew, because nowhere else, even in other gospels, it's not mentioned. Guards are not mentioned in other gospels. Why why it was not mentioned, we may discuss a little later, because the approach that I push is that each evangelist had his own, so to say, agenda, how the composition of the account is built up. And so this agenda fits, actually, this description fits into Matthew's Matthew's overall plan and outline. You know, it started with rejection of Jesus as a messianic king by political leader of Israel of those days, of Judea, Herod. We know the story of his birth. Now, this is the end of his life. So to say, executed through the decision of spiritual leaders of Judea. That means temple authorities, two high priests mainly, and their retinues. They not only did it, they want to block all kind of following of Jesus. Their thinking, interesting in Matthew, as the thinking of Herod, was purely political, but let's say informed. Herod think, okay, they did not tell me about this. First of all, he found out where it's going to be happen. According to the tradition, Bethlehem was kind of pronounced. When Magi or astrologers didn't report the place, he had his measures. He sent and cut all male children, 2 years of age and down. So that was his way to deal with any political threat to his power. Now, they definitely, high priests definitely see Jesus as a threat for their power. Whether they were paranoid is another story. Herod also was paranoid, and it's known about him. So they paranoidly were afraid. Their fear was expressed and accounted in John. They simply said that, look, the man has such a popularity that the rebellion may start any moment, as they believed. So when the rebellion will, Romans will come and will take away from us the temple and the people. And that's exactly what happened, but not because of Jesus. 40 years later, because of Jewish war. That's exactly what had happened. So it was self-fulfilled prophecy, but not obviously for Anna and Caiaphas, who were already aged men. They probably didn't survive into this days. So, but it was so their thinking was well informed in their terms. So they had their spies, and according to the spies, they knew that this man predicted his resurrection on the third day. They obviously didn't believe in any resurrection. They were Sadducees. They didn't believe in any resurrection, not even the resurrection in which, Judaism believed, and Pharisees believed in the last day, so to say. So for them, it was absolutely impossible. The man is dead, deadly dead. So let's kind of secure this state of his deadness. No one really expected anything else. They did not. And as we see, disciples did not. Women who came, they did not. They came to to bury someone who was so dear to him and who was also their healer. We know that Mary Magdalene, about her was said she was possessed badly. Jesus liberated her. Other women were, some of them were healed. Some of them were mothers of the disciples, like mother of Zebedee's. So, so they, uh, so kind of what moved them to this burial was human compassion and women's faithfulness, to the one they love. They want to give him a burial of their own, regular, traditional burial. They saw the hasty, haste burial of some of them, of Joseph and Arimatheus, very, very quick, and put them there. So let's do it, normal way. Because, burial is a very important thing in traditional Judaism. It has, Shiva sitting for the 7 days. Remember, we just remember description of the burial in uh, of Lazarus. Jesus came there on the fourth day. And though it was just the fourth day after his death, there was still the time of lamentation in, Mary and Martha, and this kind of the Jews were coming to. So it is big thing. Lazarus, who was just a regular individual, he was their brother, maybe a very good man, but he was a prophet and their personal healer too, and the man whom they loved and adored, who attracted them. So obviously they came for this purpose. That's a background of all that all evangelists think. Now, here we read Matthew's account. Now, account of the resurrection itself. Not the resurrection, what happened with the first witnesses of the event itself, just or news of the event, how they came about. It's Matthew, we read Matthew 28:1-8. Mary, huh?
Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat upon it. His appearance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell the disciples that he has risen from the dead. And behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. Lo, I have told you." So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. You can read the last one. Behold. Okay, next.
Okay. And behold, Jesus met them and said, "Hail." And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brethren to go to Galilee, and there they will see me."
Okay, so the main recipients of this news, and so far only, these women, we don't know how many of them, he just mentioned two. Does he? But okay, first of all, yes. Now after the Sabbath, the word and went to see he mentions just two of them. So then there's kind of an explosion. It seems that they were also witness of it. So the reaction is, first of all, the reaction of the guards. They lost their conscience out of, obviously, if we be there, probably the same happened to us. So women were preserved from that. But definitely, it was not something that happens every day. It's not something that they expected. So it's an extreme agitation. What just happened? Then angel addresses them. Then addresses them with a commission, by the way. He gives a whole commission to them. Go to the disciples, tells them, and then let them go to Galilee. And when they say they saw Jesus risen, and he repeats the same commission to them. Now, what do we hear in Mark? It's at 16:18. And when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, they went to the tomb when the sun had risen. And they were saying to one another, who will roll away the stone from us from the door of the tomb? And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were all amazed. I want to stop here at this point. We have to realize that neither Matthew, nor Mark, nor Luke were the witnesses of these events. They wrote on the basis of the account of others. So if, as I believe and many others, that John's gospel is written by John, who was a disciple, then he was there with Peter and saw the picture. And actually, the tomb, and empty tomb, entered first who was believed, and so on and so forth. So, the account was written several decades after that. So, various testimonies are, they have several essential things that they all agree on. But they also convey the tremendous agitation that these women went through. Matthew, for instance, Mark simply says, look, they were saying to her, first of all, they didn't know. In Mark, it's interesting. They went out to do these things, and then they realized that they cannot open the tomb because they're just women. How you take this huge stone out of this. Maybe they asked their sons or some males, and they refused to go with them. Maybe they even decided or resolved that it's useless to ask them in their state of mind. Let's do it ourselves. And when they went, they had this kind of back thought, how are we going to do it? Yeah. And then they saw that the stone was rolled back, for it was very large. So, first of all, what do you think, first of all? If you go to the grave and see that it's open, grave's usually not open, right? That something happened, that someone stole the body for whatever reason. So it's tremendous excitement that they went through. But then they entered there and saw the young man in the white robe And they were extremely amazed, extremely, as it says. And he said to them, do not be amazed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him, as he told you. And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had come upon them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Actually, it is believed by scholars that this is the actual end of the Gospel of Mark. That's his conclusion. What is considered as a conclusion later, definitely, in my opinion also, is the later addition. Because it's kind of, it has different elements in it. It's not in the style of Mark. So why Mark ends it here? Because in his gospel, it's perfectly normal. For him, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ is his entrance into our human history. But his exit out of this history is not exit from the history, because Jesus continues to be present in the mind of the early church. That's exactly what says so-called second conclusion of Mark, which definitely indicates other authors of the church tradition that just made up kind of from different sources, very though dense. Jesus, his appearance, his last commission, and so on and so forth, but it kind of taken from different conclusions. But for Mark, it is perfectly so. He wanted to convey, so to say, human and divine, if you wish, complete human inadequacy in front of this situation of resurrection of the teacher. Women were so afraid and so out of their minds that they didn't even say anybody. Because if we read what is said in Gospel of Matthew, and particularly Luke, that when some women came to disciples, they didn't believe them at all. Look, that's what Luke conveys. So, who in Luke did it first? Mary, if you have it at hand, you read much better. That's Luke 24, 1:12. Maybe you read it to us.
Sure. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices which they had prepared. And they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, behold, two men stood by them in dazzling apparel. And as they were frightened and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, "Why do you seek the living among the dead? Remember how he told you, while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the third day rise." And they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, and the other women with them, who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to an idle tale, and they did not believe them.
Okay, but okay, let us again, let us kind of think what Luke conveys. Luke writes his gospel from outside completely. He was not among disciples. He went, he collected evidences. And in his evidences, it's general evidence. What women came. Even if there was 3 women, they came to those who were before with them against, and they conveyed this message. And women usually believe to others women, though they didn't understand it. But they kind of, and they said kind of, that was their, what they conveyed to the disciples. And how the disciples, their reaction is completely in line of their behavior. No, it couldn't be. It's impossible. Who would respect the resurrection? For 2,000 years, we believe in resurrection. But even among Christians, by and large, there are so many doubts about now resurrection of Jesus Christ. I'm not talking about our tradition, because it's out of everyday experience completely. So, and we became more and more materialistic in our vision of human being and everything. So, Jesus' words were words that were taken through the human ears as much as they could understand. Mark conveys their first reaction. Maybe later they the first reaction that was there. They were afraid and they didn't tell because they realized that it will be impossible just to believe it. Matthew doesn't say about anything too much about it. We will see how it was developed in Matthew, how he kind of develops his story. But interesting that John tells about 2 visits of Mary Magdalene to the tomb. Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw it's empty. Then she came to Peter and John and told them. Then Peter and John ran to the tomb. They were astonished, came back without clear understanding what happened. And John had some kind of belief that it might be resurrection, but he's kind of timid man, at least at his description. Now, what happened then? Mary Magdalene went back to the tomb again. Why? And then, only then she met Jesus, and she didn't recognize him. And her state of mind is expressed by description in John. What was when she saw the angel in the tomb after her second visit, she asked him. She didn't recognize angel. No. She didn't recognize even Jesus. First of all, okay, let's read it because it's very interesting. What is, okay. After the 2 disciples. Then the disciples went back to their homes. It's Matthew, John, it is John 12, and the end, John, chapter 20. Verses 11, 12. Now, the verses 13 about Mary. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. And as she wept, she stooped to look into the tomb. And she saw 2 angels in white, sitting with the body of Jesus had laid, one at the hand and one at the feet. And they said to her, Woman, why are you weeping? She said to them, Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him. Saying this, she turned round and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, Woman, why are you weeping? Whom do you seek? Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, Sir, if you had taken him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned and said to him in Hebrew, Rabbi. So what it conveys, that she was overly excited. She was out of her ability to perceive things as they are, but things were supernatural. First of all, two angels sitting there in the tomb. It didn't come to her mind why, what's they doing in the tomb to begin with? Why is these two men in white robes, kind of shining, sit there? Now they ask her, and she said, thing which is completely illogical. They have stolen the body of my Lord and taken him away. Now she saw Jesus and she recognized him and she takes him as a gardener. Why gardener will take a body from the sealed tomb? And she saw how this tomb was closed just night before. I mean, two nights before. So that means that, it does not prevent that it was her third visit. She was so excited, first of all, from the first visit, that she came back and then she saw no guards, just empty tomb already. And she thought, what happened? It had to kind of to sink down to someone's mind and understanding. So so she just came to whom she went. She went to the most close disciples, Peter and John, and announced to them. They ran and she followed. And what else is she supposed to do if it was the most important thing to find Jesus' body? She started with it, according to other synoptics, just to give him a burial. She comes first time, let's say, with others, and something happened, earthquake comes, some kind of, she ran away, she's afraid. Then she stops and says, let me kind of go back and see what happens. It's not my actually. I remember many, many years ago, still in Russia, I read kind of analysis of Catholic bishop, probably American, 60s, who compares all the stories. He wrote a little book about it. It was interesting, and so I just remember how kind of he compared all these details and pointed out. Now Catholic Church is not much interested in these stories, but in those days it was. So why there's no contradiction in these different testimonies? They are about the same thing, but they do not convey the same details. So they give different details, so to say. They convey the state of embarrassment, tremendous embarrassment, excitement, fear, uneasiness of the very act of the very fact of Jesus as alive is not yet came to him. It comes down only after Mary recognizes Jesus, runs to embrace him and said, don't touch me because I didn't yet, go to don't hold me, he said. I have to go there. But I will be back, so to say. So you see how different and at the same time the same are all these testimonies. But now let's go back to Matthew, because Matthew does not convey all these things. He is very brief in terms of the description of Jesus' appearance. Jesus' appearance as a alive man and his point. And so now, what is there? Now, so Matthew, wait a second, excuse me. So Matthew met the disciples and tells them, and tell to the women, okay, go and tell the disciples that I will meet them in Galilee, not here, in Galilee. Now, how Matthew continues, Mary. It's 28, 11, 15, and on. You can go to the end of the story.
Okay. While they were going, behold, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests all that had taken place. And when they had assembled with the elders and taken counsel, they gave a sum of money to the soldiers and said, "Tell people, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So they took the money and did as they were directed. And this story has been spread among the Jews to this day.
Okay, one moment. So first of all, let us this is the only account we have about this council, post-resurrectional council of the Synedrion, or maybe it was a small council, doesn't matter. But first of all, to quiet down these guards, so they bought their silence and said, so they apparently were not soldiers that were responsible to the Pilate, as we discussed last time, because they went and they did not go and report these things to the Pilate. It would be more natural if they were Roman soldiers, obviously. First of all,
Father Michael, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Did the Jews, were they allowed to keep like ceremonial guards like at the temple, and not necessarily armed or anything like that, but just ceremonial guards?
You know, it was definitely the break of the law to begin with, because they dispatched these guards. They dispatched these guards on the great Sabbath. Maybe they did it in the end of the Sabbath. Very possible that these guards were just mercenaries. They might not be even the Jews. Why are they supposed to be? They have to kind of police. It was a temple police. You know, it was at their expense. Was it allowed or not allowed? You know, they were high priests. They were giving orders. So whether it's allowed or not allowed, the situation is extraordinary to begin with. They just push this execution. Yeah, Larissa wanted to say.
I want to, it's just a reflection about the state of mind of the high priests and of the Sanhedrin, that it's like a detective story, you know, where is the body?
Yeah.
The body, the body disappeared despite the sealed tomb, out of the sealed tomb. And so they either have to believe that he rose from the dead, or they have to invent a little explanation to them, for themselves even, and for the rest of the eternity, for those who don't want to believe in the resurrection.
Exactly. Absolutely, exactly. So they, to begin with, they didn't believe in resurrection, period.
Yeah.
That's not in their mind, even in the last days. There's no such thing. So only this life matters. And in this life, we have a temple, we have kind of religion, we have to run our secular business theocratically, religiously. Now, this man was on our way, we dispose of him. It was violent, you know, but anyway, what done, what done. Now, also very important, it was not one or two men decision. They always had a small kind of gathering, kind of small congress, so to say. What we do in such a case. So it's a kind of a general responsibility, not just our responsibility, responsibility of those who are kind of ruling circle. So how we deal with this? First of all, obviously, they believe that something happened. You know, it could material. They could, if you think about it in political terms, you can make an explosion. You can take away, this, then you can explode things and frighten guards. After all, guards are human. Then you can take a body and take it away. And then they didn't lie. It was post-truth, as we sometimes know in our days. There are some rulers that believe what they're saying. They're not lying. They just simply believe that and it's not only they, sometimes it's our situation too. Sometimes we believe what we say, even we were completely wrong. So it's such so for them it was normal. It was very expedient solution in their case. And Matthew, not without irony, accounts to it. How it came that Jewish Messiah who resurrected, who is a king of Israel, Jews don't believe in it. That's high priest and so on and so forth. They send these things. So there was nothing in the resurrection. It's just disciples' story. Look, in 20th century, we had a great biblical scholar, Rudolf Bultmann, who started the whole tradition of biblical, who believe in the same thing. It's all demythologization of the gospel. It's all story of resurrection resurrection and miracles and all. That was a church later dogmatic inventions that vested bare message, kerygma of one particular prophet, and so 19th century literature about Jesus, yes, he's a social reformer, great social reformer, forerunner of the socialism and so on and so forth, and many other things. Yes, powerful man, powerful leader. He died as everybody else. He was obviously, the ruling class took him away, but his message, his teaching still kind of for us in some of its part relevant. So, but Bultmann, 20th century, the whole, the man who was sitting in his study, almost never left it, and never went even to the Holy Land, but, who was a good Greek scholar and textologist. And so the whole life he was studying, these things, and even produce a school of his own. Why we would not forgive this high priest and the Sanhedrin, that obviously they had much less reasons to believe in the real resurrection of Jewish Messiah, Jesus Christ, than Bultmann, who was a Christian, Protestant, who lived all his life and studied the New Testament all his life, So there's nothing to be really amazed at.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
This whole fashion started in the 19th century. It became a literary and intellectual fashion with the detective novel. The detective novel started with Edgar Allan Poe, who wrote the first detective story. And then you had, Sherlock Holmes and everything else. And it became the fashion that there's a logical reason for everything, and that there's nothing mystical, that you will always find a logical reason. And it's very interesting that around the same time that all these theologians started in these liberal theologians in the 19th century, there's a whole movement that began that William Shakespeare didn't write William Shakespeare. It's very interesting. It was absolutely parallel that, it couldn't have been Shakespeare. It couldn't have been a genius. It had to have been people who came from the university, and Jesus was just a simple carpenter. And Shakespeare was just a simple guy from Stratford, an actor who didn't go to university. And so, oh, this person couldn't have written. It had to be a committee, or it had to be, these intellectuals who wrote Shakespeare, because it was absolutely parallel. And this was tied in with the birth of the detective novel, the detective stories, which was a new genre in literature. And that's where this skeptical thinking that everything must have some kind of rational explanation, and that nothing religious or mystical that goes into the realms of the mystical can be true.
Yeah, absolutely right. And yeah, go ahead. Yes, Lars.
No faith in higher education. If you're well educated, you can write like Shakespeare.
Also, the 19th century, it was kind of a crisis of personalism. It's interesting, personalism. It was replaced by kind of a social philosophy, all the kind of only collective body can do something, produce. So it's not so collective body of disciples, collective body of the church invented the whole thing. So why this? But look, it's philosophical issue. So we're not going into it right now. I just want to kind of to finish with Matthew, and it's really so. Now we go to through some. Okay. The end of it to Matthew. Matthew doesn't give accounts of all other appearances. We have them in Luke and in John, which is very important because, and when we will discuss Luke, let's say, so we'll see how it all fits into his account. But it perfectly, the ending of Matthew, conclusion, perfectly fits to his account. And it is 16:20, Mary.
Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, to the close of the age."
Interesting. So there's a jump from message of the women to the 11. So nothing in between, no appearances. Matthew doesn't mention these appearances. Why? For him, it's important, obviously, I can't just read his mind, but in terms of the outline, that it is pretty logical. So why in Galilee? Because Judea, Jesus, first of all, appears to whom? To whom he appears to begin with. First, he appears to those who were faithful to him. And Mary was the first, She was always, let's say, these myrrh bearers, these women were faithful to him in his death. So he appeared to them first in his resurrection. That's normal thing. Now they conveyed that to disciples with their story, which apparently convinced them. And we know that they were convinced after several apparitions of Jesus. In Luke, described in Luke, and then described in John, in his first conclusion. Then already kind of John takes us to the lake of, to Galilee, to the lake of Gennesaret, with his second conclusion. But that's another story. We're not discussing John right now. So that's exactly where the disciples came to the mountain and they met Jesus in what he said to them. He said to them what was announced in the beginning of the gospel. It's a royal gospel. What is the royal gospel? Who is the roi? Who is the king? The one who has authority. But Jesus, universal authority, has. He's a universal king, king of the universe. Therefore, all authority on heaven and on earth is given to him. To him. We would know that from John because he in his prologue, that's a logos who comes and become incarnate. So he has authority to begin with as a creator. In Matthew, so there is a different approach. It starts from this, Jesus is the son of David and son of Abraham. First of all, he embodies the whole Abrahamic tradition, but also Davidic tradition. He's a king of the lost line of David, lost from power, lost from history, so to say. He reemerges in history in the beginning of the gospel as adopted by Joseph. Then we all followed his life story, his end, his resurrection, and his announcement to his disciples. So probably 11 disciples went there, but it was not precluded that there was someone else with the 11 disciples. It's not that only 11 disciples went there. So 11 disciples went there. There were some others, maybe, who go, let's go. And when they saw Jesus, some of them doubted. Some of them were joyed, they were glad to see him alive again. And the message, and the message. So I'm with you to the end of the age. So I have all authority and I'm with you. So here starts, so to say, presence of Jesus through his church and within his church, which first of all collected and gathers and carries on this information about his life, his death, and his resurrection as something which is going on and on and on, which is ever present. Sorry, Larissa, yes.
I have a question about geography, because they all went. They went to Galilee. In Luke, there is an ascension outside Jerusalem, and he told them to stay in Jerusalem. So it is well. It certainly should be possible to reconcile it somehow. But on the surface, it seems as if they all rushed to Galilee and then somehow also came back to Jerusalem.
I don't see, first of all, look, the excitement of the resurrection itself, excitement, enormous excitement. That kind of push them off the normal. I don't know what was a normal track of life. That's, gospel do not convey to us whether they were continue their trade somehow, or they completely abandoned in following Jesus, whether following him all the time or just, so the description in the accounts of the evangelists does not give us this picture. It gives us fragmentary pictures. So we have to realize that it's fragmentary. John gives us fragmentary pictures of Jesus and Jews in Jerusalem during the feast days. Mainly, almost nothing about Galilee, few scenes in Galilee, and then the Last Supper discourse, which is a revelation to the 11. And then passion story and resurrection story. That's John. So we have to realize it's not comprehensive account of Jesus' life. That's a big mistake that many in biblical criticism, New Testament criticism, take this assumption that we have the account of Jesus' life. And no, it is theological glimpse. Each one gives his theological glimpse. Synoptics work with about similar body of data, but present it very differently. And if we look with a kind of magnifying glass, we see the details are also different. Not all of them, but some differs. And they differ, they give bigger reality, in particular in their details. So Laura, I cannot answer your question because that's how things. But look, I remember when in our class on New Testament St. Tikhon Seminary, there were questions between students. So whom we should trust in nativity stories, Matthew or Luke? Because in Matthew, there were Magi's, and they came to Bethlehem. And they came to Bethlehem, and they departed. Angel warns Joseph. Joseph takes Mary and the child and departs to Egypt. Luke, nevertheless, speaks about, his circumcision, their visit to the temple on the fourth day, on the 40th day. But by the way, Matthew did not specify on which day after Jesus' birth the Magi arrived. He said, when, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, they may came in after, when he was 3 months old, 4 months old. Why they still stayed in Bethlehem, we may ask. Who knows? Maybe Joseph had kind of, he had skills in his hands. He could start, open his little shops there, not to take Mary, who just, back to, they came to Bethlehem out of necessity because it was Caesar's dogma. That means order. Dogma means order, and it's imperial decree. So that they had to come out of necessity. But now to travel back to Nazareth, with who maybe they stayed there for some time, and then all of a sudden they got to run away from Herod. So and they went to. So actually, if we try to, so to say, to have compilation of events of all the four Gospels, like Christian writer of the 2nd century Tatian did, then we have a wrong impression that they are in somehow chronological sequence, one after another, one after another, one after another, and then you have the whole picture. Each Gospel gives us not complete picture, but if we take everything else and put it in chronological order, then we have the same. But it is wrong to begin with, because Gospels themselves, the accounts, they don't give us chronological picture. They don't give us chronological framework. The only man who actually does it is Luke, who puts it into his. He writes for general, by and large, to audience of the empire. And for him, it's important to say that it was done in such and such year, under Tiberius, 15 years of the Tiberius, when Anna and Caiapha were high priests, when, this one, Philip was kind of, so how historically, chronologically, where these things took place, where there was no common chronology. There was chronology. One time was a Roman time, Roman chronology after emperors. Others were Jewish calendar, which is completely different. Even today, Jewish calendar different from. So they just live together, as many other calendars, by the way. Chinese Persian New Year. We have so many friends. We celebrate. They celebrate, but we kind of partake of their different, chronologies. In this chronology, you cannot have one from chronology. So particularly how you and each one describes within his own. Chronology of Luke doesn't mean anything to Matthew, who writes to his Jewish audience in the land of Judea, that he is the Messiah. He is a Davidic Messiah who is now rules over all of us. John says he's one of the Holy Trinity to begin with. They all mainly say that, but John makes kind of theological statements that inform all future councils. You see, it's there. Yes, Father David.
Father, I just wanted to say that about the nativity. In Matthew, I'm just going to read that sentence. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw Mary and the child. So it's interesting because in all the paintings and icons, we always saw the cave where there was in the inn there was no room. But just going back to what Peter was talking about last time about the Roman soldiers, and all that. The nature of painting is that it can put two different times together in one place. That's its advantage.
Yeah.
And also that the consciousness of history and time, that is not just because this is historical and that we're putting it now, but that even in our daily lives, our present and past are together. We could travel by the Spirit at will. So it's painting is not a reliable source in terms of facts.
Sure. But it's reliable in terms of the theology, like
that's what the point,
Yeah, medieval or Renaissance, you see together, Mary and Jesus, and they're Peter and Paul, and they're donors, and they're Saint Augustine, and they're Saint Francis, and they're all together because in heaven they're all together in a way.
And also, but I just wanted to say one more thing. As an artist, you always wanted to have what's happened in the past because it is ever existing, to put it in the present time. It's normal. I mean, Richard Pavia always brought me to this attention to this painter named Stanley Spencer. And there was a painting of him, of Christ carrying the cross in an English village passing through. So this is anyway.
Yeah, you are right. You are completely right. So, but it is interesting. One of the point, of our discussion that I will try to make it point that Gospels don't give us chronology. John gives us chronology around Jewish feasts. That's all. But he does not name all of them. He mainly most of them, but one we assume that's a New Year. But when? We don't even know whether it was 3 Easter, 3 Passovers, or 1. Because he said around the Passover time. But which Passover? We assume there was a 3 years because he mentions 3 times Passovers. And Passover happens only once a year. But not necessarily. In Mark, you have impression that it all took place within several months even. Maybe less than a year. So quick everything. Matthew and Luke gives us somehow, but also not when they then came at such and such days, they passed, this Samaritan village, and they came to Capernaum at such and such time. No. So therefore, and it was not there to begin with. It was, first of all, it was not even in their mind, because their mind's attitude toward time was not our attitude toward time. It's only in our civilization, so to say, time is money. What if time is money. It's big question whether these two realities are convertible. In any sense, but it was not for them. Even for our attitude to time changes with radically with every century. Not to talk about first century Jerusalem. Was a Jewish long festival, and the religious festivals, even Judaism, even today they take several days. Several days. People are not rushing. So it's a different pace of life. Therefore, we cannot apply our perception of time sequence to their perception of things. For us, everything is kind of the same. Time is time is equal to itself. No, there are important events that are significant, and there are others which are not. All right. Let's, brothers, this I'm talking too long. So, any questions and comments?
Thank you.
All right. So I think that if you don't mind, we'll go next time from starting with, we go to Luke, if you don't mind. Luke, I have it in English, not exactly as structured as Matthew, but Luke is completely different story because it has two parts and so on and so forth, if you wish. So those of you who kind of interested, we can do with Luke.